YouTube! Welcome back to another episode. Today's episode has been requested for quite some time. I finally had the opportunity to make this episode happen. The question is, the Honda Fury fuel filter and fuel pump. How to change it, what to do, where it is. I'm your host, Stevie, and this here's the Valley Garage. You guys have been asking for it, so here it is. This is the Honda Fury fuel pump. You can get this at most places, Partzilla, Revzilla, Rocky Mountain ATV, Motosport, all your various spots. I'll put the link or the item code in the description below. Heck, you can even get it on eBay. There's two parts to the fuel pump. There is the pump itself and the fuel filter, which looks like this. Comes like this. Open this up here. This is the Honda Fury fuel pump. And this fuel pump is located behind this panel right here. It's a bit of a pain to get to. I would probably say you would require a bike jack such as this. If you don't have one of those, I'd get you one of those. Not even for this job, but just for your brakes, your coolant, doing an oil change. It's just easier to work on the bike. Disclaimer, I would not change the fuel filter or the fuel pump unless I absolutely had to. There's no reason to really change the filter in the pump. It's all built into this. It's not a problem that you would typically have. Let me rephrase that. Let me put this in a better way. I would absolutely not fuck with the fuel filter or the fuel pump unless I absolutely had to, okay? For whatever reason, you think that the pump is bad or you think you want to change the fuel filter, I'll show you how, but honestly, I wouldn't touch it if I didn't have to. But for argument's sake, you got the fuel pump out of the bike, this is how you'll change the fuel filter. The fuel pump looks like this. There's a bracket, the pump is on the inside. You have your fuel lines and your electronic device to say, hey, turn the pump on when the ignition in the bike is on. And now, there are 6 8mm bolts. I will take them off individually. It's the bolt and there's a little collar on there. Okay, the 6 8mm bolts are off. You'll have the top bracket. Then you're gonna wanna take a pick and be careful and start to separate the pump itself. There is an oil O-ring inside the pump that's gonna make it pretty firm. I get the pick in and pull up just a little bit so I can get a flat screwdriver head in there. And again, go very careful, there's an O-ring. When you buy a new fuel filter, inside the kit will come with new O-rings. Initial take apart, obviously you're changing everything, so it comes with the new gaskets. For me, this is a spare pump that I bought just in case I run into a problem. That's why I'm being extra careful. Once you pop all your pieces off and you lift carefully, inside you will see the fuel filter on its side. The old style was on the bottom, the new style is on the side. The old style fuel filter, Honda found out is that when the fuel was being captured and sucked up into the pump, it was having problems. So they discovered this, they redesigned it. All new fuel pumps that you purchase from here on out will have the fuel filter on the proper side, which is on the side, not on the bottom. This is the fuel filter set. You'll notice on the back, it has a little earpiece. It's got 2 prongs here and here. What you need to do very carefully is to pick each side of the prongs so the fuel filter can twist off and come out. The filter set has a little dust cover on there. To put it back on, put the filter back on sideways, push so it snaps in and twist. Click, click. That is how you put the new filter on the fuel pump. It will come with 2 O-rings. Very important. The fuel pump is always pressurized, even when the motorcycle is off. So it's very important to replace the inner gasket and the outer gasket of the fuel pump. If this is dirty, clean it up the best you can, and it goes in. It can go in any way, but it is directional. You can make a mistake is what I'm saying. You'll notice on the fuel pump housing, there's two little tab shapes to try to help remind you to align the pump in a specific way. The straight pieces go through here like this, okay? And then this half moon shape will match up like that. And it may be snug to get back in because, again, the fuel system is always pressurized. So just carefully push down the filter into its position. It should look like this. Pause the video if you need a second. From factory, they Sharpie each of the lines. So just to be sure, make sure you are correct on their alignment. The lines will line up. Same thing with the ring. This metal top piece isn't so super critical. The actual pump itself and the direction is really what matters. Once you have that replaced, put your 8mm bolts back together and you have a newly replaced fuel filter in your fuel pump. That's how you change the filter in case you already have the pump out of the bike. Start with that first so that you guys can actually see what the hell I'm even talking about. Because I, for one, have no problem with my fuel pump. Ergo, I'm not taking my Fury all the way apart to show you how to do it when my pump is working just fine. Tighten them all down and you will reverse the install process. Once these are all down, I'm gonna give them a nice snug. When I tighten, I'm gonna go every other one. Good, snug, snug, snug. For you torque heads in there, it's gonna be 8.8 Newton meters because you don't need that much foot-pounds. It's not listed in the manual. So that's 8.8 Newton meters. Recap, old style, filter was on the bottom of the fuel pump. New style, filter's on the side of the fuel pump because in the first 2 years of Honda production Furies, they were having problem drawing fuel into the injectors, okay? 8 mils on the top, 8.8 Newton meters. Remember your two gaskets and your two clip points. That's how you do that. Now, the meat and potatoes. How the fuck do I even get the fuel pump out of the bike? How do you get there? You gotta take a lot apart. If you're nifty, and you're a contortionist and you can get in there and not have to take a lot of things apart, be my guest. But again, it's easier if you just take the extra steps. Basically, you're disassembling the whole freaking rear end. Not all the way, but you're taking apart a good amount to get to the fuel pump itself. Remember, the fuel pump is always pressurized. So remember that. I want you to pop your fuel pump and get fuel in your eyes and be like, Steve at the Valley fucked me up. No, that's on you. Again, I would only do this if I absolutely had to. I don't have an issue with that. Maybe this job might be a little too big for you. Hey, just take it down to a dealership. They fuck it up, it's on them, all right? That's on them. How do we get to the fuel pump? The fuel pump is located on your right-hand side underneath the rear shock. Best way to get to that, first, pop your side panels off. All right, take one off. Next, what you want to do is get a 5 hex head bolt and take off the 2 seat bolts. All right, take off your spike, your sissy bar, your back bracket, whatever's easy for you, and your rear fender. Next, what you want to do is get 2 10mm sockets and you want to undo the lower fuel tank bolt. lift up on the tank a little bit, wiggle it, so you can get the gas tank nut and bolt off. What you want to do is get a piece of wood, lift up on the fuel tank. The reason why you want to have the block of wood up here is because you're going to have to pinch off these fuel lines, okay? Because you don't want fuel going down to the fuel pump. You can get a clamp, a clothespin, a strong clothespin, something to squeeze on these tubes, make sure that the flow of fuel doesn't go through there. In my case, I have my tricky air ride suspension. You may actually have your stock shock with the little knob here that you can turn. If you don't have a bike jack, I'd advise you to get one, because what you need to do next is put the jack under the bike and lift it up so you can relieve weight off of the rear tire. To give yourself more room, I would remove the rear shock. You're gonna have the bottom bolt here to go through, and you're gonna have the top piece, and the whole shock should come out. That will give you enough room to reach the top of the fuel pump. On top of the fuel pump is a black connector that will connect right here. Okay? When you turn the ignition on, the signal tells the fuel pump to engage to prime up the lines. Remember, this is always under pressure. That's why you have a double gasket and 8 rings to hold on the top. You need to push the little pin in and take off the 2-pin connector on the bike. Once the connector is disconnected, the next step is when you turn the ignition key on with the fuel lines pinched closed, and you want to run the bike until it can't run anymore and it stalls out. Do that sequence 2-3 more times to make sure all the fuel is used up within the fuel pump itself. Because again, it's pressurized. When you start taking the fuel lines off, you don't want it to explode and fuel go all over the place. These are the fuel line connectors that are on top of the fuel pump and connect all the way to the injectors underneath the air intake scoop, or in this case, the big triangle piece if you have a stock. The fuel lines will have a little barb here, and that's where the fuel lines will actually snap and connect into. That barbed line is right here. You will take the connectors, push down on both sides of the locking pawls, and then grab the joint here, essentially pushing the 2 pins in, grabbing and disconnecting the fuel lines. You will do the fuel line disconnect after you take apart the black 2-piece connector and run the bike to make sure all the fuel is out of the system. And then you'll be able to pull the lines off of the fuel pump itself. Might be kind of hard to visualize. I'm doing the best that I can. I'm not gonna change my fuel pump just because to make a video. There's nothing wrong with my pump, but this is how you would do it. If it's anything, it's a good video to kill on a Sunday while you're waiting for your people to wake up on a Sunday morning. This is a picture of the fuel pump here. Note your metal bracket and the pump itself all come together. The fuel pump will sit in this little tiny carousel. The bottom of the fuel pump has this little teat on here, which then sits into this bottom panel here, so you don't get the vibrations and move. So, and it's directional. You can't mess this up. The pin goes in the very bottom hole, and then the 2 side holes here and here will then match up through the bracket itself. The fuel pump bracket is part of the frame. You'll see the bracket right here. And that is the 2 bolts in the back that hold the pump into the bracket. This is my air pump from my air ride. It's hard to get a visual on that. Take the bike, put it on a jack, take off your side covers, take off your 5mm hex heads, your rear fender, your 2 10mm tank bolts, lift up with a piece of wood, blocking the fuel lines, possibly take your shock out so you can have access to sneak out the fuel pump itself. Pull the black pin connector, turn the bike on, let it cycle till all the fuel is used up in the fuel pump itself. When that's done, push the two side pieces of the connector, pop that off. There are 3 fuel lines. Once that's removed, you'll then be able to sneak out the filter or the pump itself. At this point, you can see how involved this is. If it were me, I would just buy a whole new pump altogether, as it has the fuel filter assembly. It's just a direct replacement. It's a lot of steps to get to, but once it is, put the pump back where it was, connect the 3 fuel lines. You can't mess it up. They are directional, and there are 3 different sizes, so you can't put them in the wrong hole. And then reverse, shock, black pin connector, put the tank down, put the fender on, put the seat on, bolt it all the way up, and it should kick over and start. Once the fuel pump is installed, before you put the fender and have the shock and everything back together, run the bike. See if you can get it to turn on and idle. Sorry about that. Sikorsky Blackhawk was ruining the shot, flying over. Yes, so when the fuel pump is back together, the fuel line's on the pump, the 2-pin connector clicked in, turn the key, cycle the gas. It may have some trouble trying to start here and there till things get pressurized. It shouldn't be an issue, but that's how you will change your fuel pump. If it runs and idles, then you know you're good to go. You can put your shock back on, 2 top bolts, 12, 14 mil, fender, seat, gas tank, and you're good to go. All right, that's today's episode. I hope you liked that. It's the best I can do without actually having to do it myself. And like I said, I'm not gonna do that because I don't need to. But at least you have a visual, you have pictures, you have fuel pump kit for the filter and the fuel pump itself. You can kind of get an idea where it is. It's not that difficult to do. It's just really involved to get to the pump itself. Listen, you know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell. If you like today's episode, fantastic. If you got any questions, give me a shout out. If you got a 2010, 2011 Fury, sorry. But your fuel pump might be fucked up down the line. Do yourself a favor, buy an extra fuel pump, have it good to go on the side if you got the funds, and just rock with it. Maybe you'll never need it, but it's good to have it and not need it, than need it and not have one. Y'all be good, enjoy the weekend.